Ambassador Phoebe's tentacles coiled in revulsion as she laid eyes on the human welcoming party. She had always despised Earth and its inhabitants, but nothing could have prepared her for the events that would unfold on Proxima Accords, forever altering her perception of human anatomy. The sleek silver starship touched down on the landing pad of the United Earth Embassy. As the hatch hissed open, Phoebe emerged, her large compound eyes narrowing with contempt. The fate of crucial trade negotiations between Earth and Teller Prime rested on her shoulders, and failure could spark interspecies conflict. Russell Rice, the embassy's lead negotiator, stood at the forefront of the human delegation. His tall, muscular frame cut an impressive figure in his formal attire. Known for his charm and wit, Russell extended his hand in greeting, a welcoming smile on his face. Phoebe's tentacles writhed in disgust. She brushed past Russell, deliberately knocking into him. The human stumbled, caught off guard by the Tellarite's hostility. As he fell, his formal attire tore, exposing a part of his lower body. Time seemed to slow as Phoebe's eyes inadvertently locked onto Russell's exposed anatomy. Her tentacles froze mid-writhe, and a noticeable change came over her demeanor. She stared, transfixed, at the sight before her. The other Tellarite delegates whispered among themselves, shocked by Phoebe's uncharacteristic behavior. They had never seen their outspoken ambassador rendered speechless, especially not by a human. Russell quickly covered himself and regained his composure, unaware of the profound effect he'd had on the alien diplomat. He straightened his torn clothing, a faint blush coloring his cheeks as he tried to maintain his professional demeanor. As the delegation moved inside the embassy, Phoebe's gaze lingered on Russell. Her earlier hostility had vanished, replaced by a mix of confusion and intrigue. She found herself unable to look away from the human negotiator, her mind racing with unfamiliar thoughts. The grand conference room awaited them, its high ceilings and sleek design a testament to the importance of the impending negotiations. The human and Tellarite teams took their seats around the massive table, with Russell and Phoebe directly across from each other. The weight of the moment settled over the room. Both sides were acutely aware that the outcome of these talks could shape the future of Earth-Teller relations. The possibility of increased tensions and conflict loomed over them like a shadow. As the negotiations began, Phoebe found herself uncharacteristically distracted. Her usual anti-Earth rhetoric faltered, the words dying on her lips as she struggled to focus on anything but Russell. Her eyes kept darting to the human, her mind replaying the earlier incident. The other negotiators noticed the shift in Phoebe's demeanor. Confused glances were exchanged across the table as the typically fiery Tellarite ambassador fumbled her words and lost her train of thought. An atmosphere of uncertainty descended upon the proceedings, threatening to derail the entire negotiation before it had even truly begun. Russell, for his part, remained oblivious to the turmoil he had inadvertently caused. He pressed on with the talks, his charm and wit on full display as he presented Earth's position. Yet with each word he spoke, Phoebe found herself more captivated, her long-held beliefs about humans beginning to crumble. As the first round of negotiations drew to a close, one thing became abundantly clear. Ambassador Phoebe's hatred for Earth was wavering, all because of an accidental glimpse of human male anatomy. The fate of interstellar relations now hung in the balance, hinging on one Tellarite's newfound fascination with the human form. As the first round of negotiations drew to a close, Russell couldn't help but notice the peculiar change in Ambassador Phoebe's demeanor. The Tellarite's earlier hostility had given way to an odd mix of distraction and fascination, her compound eyes darting to him repeatedly throughout the proceedings. Sensing an opportunity to shift the dynamics in Earth's favor, Russell cleared his throat and addressed the room. Esteemed colleagues, I believe we've made good progress today. However, I sense we could all benefit from a short recess. Perhaps a tour of our embassy's gardens would help clear our minds and foster a more conducive atmosphere for further discussions. The other negotiators murmured in agreement, relief evident on their faces. The tension that had permeated the room began to dissipate as they filed out of the conference room and into the lush alien hybrid garden that sprawled across the embassy grounds. Russell deliberately positioned himself near Phoebe as they strolled along the winding paths. Vibrant, otherworldly flora surrounded them, a testament to the successful blending of Earth and alien plant species. He gestured to a particularly striking blue-leaf tree with spiral-shaped fruit. Ambassador, have you ever seen a Terran-Centauri hybrid like this before? It's quite remarkable how it adapted to Proxima 4's environment. Phoebe's tentacles twitched, her eyes fixed on Russell's face as he spoke. No, I haven't, she stammered, uncharacteristically flustered. It's intriguing. As they continued their walk, Russell seized every opportunity to engage Phoebe in casual conversation about Earth's flora. He noticed how her gaze lingered on him, her earlier disgust replaced by an unmistakable curiosity. The other Tellarites exchanged confused glances, whispering among themselves about their lead negotiator's sudden change in attitude. Suddenly, Russell's foot caught on an exposed root. He stumbled forward, arms flailing, and plunged into a shallow, decorative pond. Water splashed everywhere as he struggled to his feet, his formal attire now thoroughly soaked and clinging to his muscular frame. "Oh my," he said, feigning embarrassment. "How clumsy of me." Phoebe's reaction was immediate and visceral. Her tentacles quivered with terrifying excitement, her compound eyes widening as they took in Russell's wet form. The thin, clinging fabric left little to the imagination, accentuating every curve and contour of his body. The other negotiators gathered around, concern etched on their faces. But Phoebe remained transfixed, unable to look away from the spectacle before her. Russell ran a hand through his wet hair, acutely aware of the effect he was having on the Tellarite ambassador. "I should probably change into some dry clothes," he said, his voice low and resonant. "Ambassador Phoebe, perhaps you'd like to continue our discussion about Earth's plant life in private. I have a guest suite nearby where we could talk without interruption." Phoebe's tentacles writhed in what could only be described as anticipation. Yes, that would be acceptable," she managed to say, her voice trembling slightly. As they made their way to the guest suite, leaving behind a group of bewildered negotiators, Russell could feel the tension building between them. Years of anti-Earth sentiment seemed to be crumbling in the face of Phoebe's newfound fascination with human physicality. Once inside the suite, Russell excused himself to the bathroom. He emerged moments later, a towel wrapped low around his hips, droplets of water still glistening on his chest and arms. "I apologize, Ambassador," he said, his tone deliberately casual. "It seems my spare clothes haven't arrived yet. I hope this doesn't make you uncomfortable." Phoebe stood rooted to the spot, her eyes roaming over Russell's exposed skin. Her tentacles moved of their own accord, reaching out towards him. "No, it's fine," she breathed. Unable to contain her curiosity any longer, Phoebe closed the distance between them. Her tentacle gently brushed against Russell's chest, eliciting a sharp intake of breath from both of them. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through their bodies, igniting a spark that quickly blazed into an inferno of passion. What transpired next was a blur of sensations and discoveries. Tentacles intertwined with limbs. Alien physiology met human anatomy in a dance of mutual exploration. Cultural barriers and years of prejudice melted away in the heat of their unexpected encounter. Time seemed to lose all meaning as Russell and Phoebe lost themselves in each other. It wasn't until a sharp knock at the door jolted them back to reality that they realized how long they had been absent from the negotiations. "Mr. Rice, Ambassador Phoebe, is everything all right?" The voice belonged to Jenna Martinez, Russell's assistant. They scrambled to make themselves presentable, exchanging furtive glances as they straightened their clothes and smoothed down ruffled tentacles. When they finally emerged from the suite, both looked disheveled but oddly satisfied. Jenna's eyes narrowed as she took in their appearance, her mind quickly piecing together what must have transpired. She said nothing, but the slight quirk of her eyebrows spoke volumes. As they made their way back to the conference room, Phoebe found herself viewing Earth and its inhabitants in an entirely new light. The negotiations resumed, but the dynamics had shifted dramatically. To the shock of her fellow Tellarites, Phoebe began advocating for closer ties between Earth and Tellar Prime, her earlier hostility replaced by an eager enthusiasm for cooperation. The other negotiators exchanged bewildered looks as Phoebe passionately argued for increased cultural exchange programs and joint scientific ventures. Her sudden about-face left both delegations reeling. unsure how to proceed in the face of this unexpected development. As the day's session drew to a close, rumors began to circulate about what might have transpired during Russell and Phoebe's prolonged absence. The Tellarite delegation was in disarray, their carefully planned negotiation strategy in tatters. Jenna, meanwhile, discreetly pulled out her communicator and sent an encrypted message to United Earth headquarters. She knew that news of this interspecies liaison could have far-reaching consequences for the fragile alliance between Earth and Tellar Prime. Whether it would strengthen or destroy their relationship remained to be seen. As night fell on Proxima 4, both Russell and Phoebe retreated to their respective quarters, their minds racing with the implications of their actions. They had crossed a line that could alter the course of their careers and potentially reshape interstellar relations. Yet as they lay awake in their beds, neither could deny the powerful attraction that now existed between them, nor the desire to explore it further. The embassy buzzed with whispered conversations and speculation about what the coming days might bring. Little did they know that the events set in motion that day were just the beginning of a complex web of personal desires and political intrigue that would test the limits of diplomacy and challenge the very foundations of human Tellarite relations. As the first light of dawn crept across Proxima 4, the events of the previous day cast long shadows over the embassy. The whispers that had buzzed through the corridors late into the night now erupted into a cacophony of speculation and concern. Russell awoke to an urgent message from Jenna Martinez. Emergency meeting in conference room B, Aero 800 hours. Admiral Blackwood has arrived. His heart raced as he hurriedly dressed, his mind replaying the passionate encounter with Phoebe. He knew there would be consequences, but he hadn't expected them to arrive so swiftly. Meanwhile, Phoebe found herself cornered by her fellow Tellarites, their faces a mix of confusion and disapproval. Before she could offer any explanation, a thunderous voice cut through the crowd. "Ambassador Phoebe, what is the meaning of this?" The Tellarites parted to reveal a stern-faced male, his tentacles rigid with barely suppressed fury. Grok, the senior diplomat dispatched by the Tellarite High Command, had arrived. "Your behavior yesterday was completely unacceptable," Grok growled, his compound eyes narrowing. "You've potentially compromised our entire negotiating position. Explain yourself immediately." Phoebe straightened her posture, her own tentacles twitching with defiance. "I've gained new insights into human culture that I believe will benefit our negotiations," she stated firmly. Grok's tentacles writhed in disgust. "New insights? Is that what we're calling it now? Come with me. We have much to discuss before the negotiations resume." As Grok led Phoebe away, Russell entered conference room B. Admiral Helena Blackwood stood at the head of the table, her unwavering focus fixed upon him. Jenna sat to her right, avoiding eye contact. "Mr. Rice," Admiral Blackwood began, her voice sharp as a laser. "I understand there was an incident yesterday involving you and the Tellarite ambassador. Care to explain?" Russell swallowed hard, his mind racing to find the right words. "Admiral, The door burst open, interrupting his response. A flustered aide rushed in, his face pale. "Admiral, we have a situation. A group of Proximan locals has gathered outside the embassy. They're celebrating." Blackwood's eyebrows shot up. "Celebrating what exactly?" "Interspecies cooperation, ma'am. They're calling it a cultural festival." The Admiral pinched the bridge of her nose, exhaling slowly. As if this situation wasn't complicated enough. "Mr. Rice, we'll continue this discussion later. For now, let's see what we're dealing with." They moved to the windows overlooking the embassy grounds. Sure enough, a colorful crowd had assembled, waving banners depicting stylized human and Tellarite figures holding hands. The sound of alien music drifted up, its unfamiliar rhythms oddly soothing. "Well, this is unexpected," Jenna murmured, a hint of amusement in her voice. As they watched the impromptu celebration unfold, tension filled the conference room where the negotiations were set to resume. Grok took his place at the head of the Tellarite delegation, his presence casting a pall over the proceedings. Phoebe sat further down the table, her usual confidence notably diminished. Russell entered, feeling the weight of every eye upon him. He nodded curtly to the assembled diplomats and took his seat, acutely aware of the empty chair beside him where Admiral Blackwood would soon sit. The Admiral strode in moments later, her face an unreadable mask. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "before we begin, I believe we need to address the elephant in the room." A confused murmur rippled through the Tellarite delegation at the unfamiliar Earth idiom. "There have been certain personal developments between members of our respective delegations," Blackwood continued, her gaze flicking between Russell and Phoebe. "While I understand the delicate nature of these matters, we cannot allow them to derail these crucial negotiations." Grok's tentacles writhed in agitation. "With all due respect, Admiral, I believe this matter goes beyond mere personal developments. Ambassador Phoebe's sudden shift in attitude threatens to undermine years of carefully crafted Tellarite policy." Phoebe's compound eyes flashed with indignation. "And perhaps it's time for that policy to evolve," she shot back. "Our long-standing animosity towards humans has blinded us to potential opportunities for mutual growth and understanding." The room erupted into chaos as Tellarite delegates argued amongst themselves, some supporting Phoebe's newfound perspective, while others backed Grok's traditional hardline stance. Admiral Blackwood slammed her hand on the table, the sharp sound cutting through the din. "Enough! We are here to negotiate a trade agreement, not air personal grievances. Now, let's return to the matter at hand." As the debate over resource-sharing agreements intensified, Russell saw an opening. He leaned forward, his voice clear and confident. "If I may, I have a proposal that could benefit both Earth and Tellar Prime." Grok scoffed, but Blackwood nodded for Russell to continue. Russell outlined his plan, a bold strategy that would leverage the unique strengths of both species. As he spoke, Phoebe's eyes lit up with excitement. She began to add her own insights, building upon Russell's ideas with a deep understanding of Tellarite needs and capabilities. Their collaborative approach was unlike anything the delegates had seen before. Even some of the more skeptical Tellarites found themselves nodding along, intrigued by the possibilities. Grok, however, had reached his breaking point. He surged to his feet, tentacles lashing the air. "This is outrageous! Ambassador Phoebe, you have clearly been compromised by human influence. Your behavior is disgraceful." Phoebe stood as well, her voice steady despite her trembling tentacles. "I have not been compromised, Grok. I've been enlightened. Did you know that humans possess a remarkable ability to adapt their body temperature to their environment? Or that their endocrine system—" As Phoebe continued, describing intimate details of human physiology, the room fell into a stunned silence. Russell felt his face grow hot, realizing the source of Phoebe's newfound knowledge. Admiral Blackwood's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Mr. Rice, my office. Now!" As Russell followed the Admiral out, he caught a glimpse of the chaos erupting behind him. Grok was demanding Phoebe's immediate resignation, while several younger Tellarites rallied to her defense. The sounds of the Proximan Cultural Festival drifted through the windows, a stark contrast to the turmoil within. As Russell braced himself for Blackwood's reprimand, he couldn't help but wonder how this tangled web of personal feelings and interstellar politics could possibly be unraveled. The fate of the negotiations, and perhaps the future of human-Tellarite relations, now hung in the balance. And at the center of it all stood Russell and Phoebe, their unexpected connection threatening to reshape the very foundations of interstellar diplomacy. Diplomacy. As Russell followed Admiral Blackwood to her office, he knew a pivotal moment had arrived. The Admiral's office was austere, its walls adorned with holograms of stellar cartography. Blackwood gestured for Russell to sit, her expression unreadable. "Rice, I won't mince words. This situation is unprecedented," she began, her voice low and controlled. "However, United Earth Command sees an opportunity here. They've conditionally approved a plan to use this incident as a diplomatic opening. But make no mistake, the stakes are high. One wrong move could derail your career and damage Earth's standing in the galactic community." Russell nodded, his throat dry. "I understand, Admiral. What's our next move?" "We're organizing a public forum. You and Ambassador Phoebe will address the situation head-on. It's risky, but it's our best chance to control the narrative." As Russell absorbed this information, activity outside the office caught their attention. Through the transparent walls, they saw Grok cornering Phoebe in the corridor, his tentacles writhing aggressively. You will recant this foolishness immediately, Grok's voice carried through the door, or I'll ensure certain indiscretions from your past come to light. Phoebe's compound eyes flashed defiantly. Threaten me all you want, Grok. I won't back down. What I've learned about humans, about Earth, it's too important to ignore. Blackwood's eyebrows rose slightly as she observed the exchange. It seems your Tellarite friend has had quite the change of heart, Rice. Let's hope it's enough to salvage this situation. The grand atrium of the embassy buzzed with anticipation as delegates, media representatives, and curious Proximan locals filed in. The hastily constructed stage dominated one end of the room, flanked by the flags of Earth and Teller Prime. Russell's palms were slick with sweat as he waited in the wings. Phoebe stood beside him, her tentacles twitching nervously. Are you ready for this? Russell asked softly. Phoebe's compound eyes met his gaze. No, she admitted, but it's necessary. As they took the stage, a hush fell over the crowd. Russell cleared his throat, acutely aware of the weight of expectation pressing down on them. We stand before you today to address recent events that have caused quite a stir, he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. What transpired between Ambassador Phoebe and myself was unexpected, to say the least, but it has led to a profound shift in understanding between our species. Phoebe stepped forward, her tentacles now still and composed. When I first arrived on Proxima 4, I saw humans as adversaries. My hostility was deeply ingrained, a product of years of mistrust and misinformation. But through my encounter with Mr. Rice, I've come to see the error in such thinking. As they recounted their experience, emphasizing the transformation from hostility to understanding, the audience's reaction was palpable. Murmurs of shock, disapproval, and intrigue rippled through the crowd. A group of young Tellarites near the front grew increasingly vocal in their support of Phoebe. It's time for change, one called out. We can't cling to old prejudices forever. Grok, standing at the back of the room, his face contorted in a mix of disgust and fury, shouted, This is a betrayal of Tellarite values. We cannot allow this perversion to continue. Before the situation could escalate, an unexpected voice cut through the commotion. A Proximan stepped forward, her iridescent scales shimmering under the atrium lights. If I may, she said, her translator conveying a calm, authoritative tone. I am Dr. Zara Zelix, xenobiologist at the Proxima Institute of Interspecies Studies. I believe I have information relevant to this discussion. All eyes turned to Dr. Zelix as she made her way to the stage. Russell and Phoebe exchanged puzzled glances, but stepped aside to allow her to speak. My recent research has uncovered something remarkable, Dr. Zelix continued. There is evidence of ancient genetic links between humans and Tellarites. Our findings suggest that your species may be far more compatible than previously thought. A collective gasp echoed through the atrium. The revelation sent shockwaves through both delegations, forcing them to reconsider long-held beliefs about species boundaries. As the initial shock wore off, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. Small groups formed, with humans and Tellarites engaging in earnest conversations. The honesty and vulnerability displayed by Russell and Phoebe seemed to have opened a floodgate of curiosity and openness. Jenna Martinez, who had been observing from the sidelines, approached Admiral Blackwood with an idea. Ma'am, what if we expanded the cultural festival outside the embassy? We could call it an interspecies understanding fair. It might help channel all this energy into something productive. Blackwood considered for a moment, then nodded. Make it happen, Martinez. We need all the goodwill we can get right now. As word of the fair spread, volunteers from both delegations stepped forward to participate in cultural exchanges and educational workshops. The atrium buzzed with excitement as plans took shape. However, not everyone shared in the enthusiasm. Outside the embassy, a small but vocal group of hardline Tellarites, led by Grok, had gathered in protest. Their chants of protect Tellarite purity and no to interspecies relations could be heard even through the embassy's thick walls. Russell and Phoebe found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of activity. As the day wore on, news of the events on Proxima 4 began to spread across the galaxy. Reports came in of other species, including Andorians and Vulcans, expressing interest in sending observers to the negotiations. As night fell, Russell retreated to his quarters, his mind blown from the day's events. He knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges as the negotiations resumed. The trade agreement that had seemed so straightforward just days ago now felt like a small part of something much larger and more complex. In her own quarters, Phoebe sat before a communication terminal, preparing to face the Tellarite High Command. She knew her actions had set in motion changes that would ripple through her society for years to come. As she gathered her thoughts, she found herself both terrified and exhilarated by the possibilities that lay ahead. Proxima Accords, once a quiet outpost, had become the unlikely stage for a potentially transformative moment in interstellar history. As both humans and Tellarites settled in for the night, the air thrummed with anticipation for what the new day would bring. As both humans and Tellarites settled in for the night, the air thrummed with anticipation for what the new day would bring. The first rays of Proxima Centauri's light bathed the embassy grounds in a soft, reddish glow. Russell awoke to the sound of bustling activity outside his window. Peering out, he saw a flurry of movement as embassy staff and volunteers rushed to set up booths and displays for the hastily organized Interspecies Understanding Fair. He quickly dressed and made his way to the embassy's main atrium, where he found Phoebe already engaged in conversation with a group of young Tellarites. Her tentacles moved animatedly as she spoke, her enthusiasm palpable. "Russell!" she called out, waving him over. "Come, help me explain the concept of a handshake to our curious friends here." As Russell demonstrated the human greeting, he couldn't help but marvel at how quickly things had changed. Just days ago, he and Phoebe had been adversaries. Now they stood side by side, unofficial ambassadors in this unprecedented moment of cultural exchange. The fairgrounds soon filled with a diverse mix of humans, Tellarites, and Proximan locals. The air buzzed with excitement and the mingling of languages as attendees moved from booth to booth, sampling exotic foods, examining cultural artifacts, and engaging in lively discussions. Russell and Phoebe found themselves at the center of attention, fielding questions about their experiences and the nature of their connection. As they participated in various cultural exchange activities, Russell couldn't help but notice the genuine curiosity and openness displayed by many of the attendees. During a demonstration of traditional Tellarite dance, a familiar face approached them. Dr. Zara Zelix, the Proximan xenobiologist, who had revealed the genetic link between humans and Tellarites, observed them with keen interest. "Mr. Rice, Ambassador Phoebe," she greeted them, her scales shimmering in the sunlight. "I've been watching your interactions with great fascination. The way you two complement each other is quite remarkable." Phoebe's tentacles curled inquisitively. "What do you mean, Dr. Zelix?" The scientist's eyes gleamed with excitement. "I have a proposition for you both. My team and I are conducting a groundbreaking study on interspecies compatibility. Your unique bond could provide invaluable data. Would you be willing to participate in some non-invasive tests?" Russell and Phoebe exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. After a moment, Russell nodded. "We'd be honored to contribute to your research, Doctor." As they followed Dr. Zelix to her nearby laboratory, neither Russell nor Phoebe noticed the commotion near the edge of the fairgrounds. A group of hardline Tellarites, led by Grok, had gathered with containers of what appeared to be small iridescent insects. "This will show them the folly of their ways," Grok muttered, his tentacles twitching with anticipation. "Release the stink bugs!" The group scattered, opening the containers and unleashing swarms of Tellarite stink bugs throughout the fair. However, as the insects made contact with the Proximan atmosphere, something unexpected occurred. Instead of the noxious odor they were known for, the bugs began emitting a surprisingly pleasant floral scent. Fairgoers paused, sniffing the air in confusion before breaking into laughter and delight. The failed prank became an instant source of amusement, with humans and Tellarites alike trying to catch the sweet-smelling insects. Oblivious to the chaos outside, Russell and Phoebe underwent a series of tests in Dr. Zelix's lab. They stood in adjacent chambers, connected to various monitoring devices, as the scientist and her team observed their physiological responses to each other's presence. "Fascinating," Dr. Zelix murmured, her eyes fixed on the data streams flowing across her screens. The levels of neurochemical compatibility we're seeing are unprecedented. It's as if your bodies are in perfect harmony, despite your vastly different biologies. As the test concluded, a loud alarm suddenly blared throughout the embassy complex. Russell tensed, his military training kicking in. "What's happening?" Dr. Zelix hurried to a communication panel, her scales rippling with concern. After a brief exchange, she turned to Russell and Phoebe, her expression grave. "Security has detected intruders attempting to infiltrate the main power grid. They believe it's a human extremist group." Russell's mind raced. "The Terran Purity Front," he said grimly. "They must be trying to sabotage the negotiations." Phoebe's tentacles writhed anxiously. "We need to do something. If they damage the power grid, it could destabilize the atmospheric generators. The consequences for everyone on Proxima 4 would be catastrophic." Without hesitation, Russell sprung into action. "Dr. Zelix, alert Admiral Blackwood. Phoebe, we need to organize a security response. Let's gather volunteers from both human and Tellarite delegations. We'll need everyone's skills to stop this threat." As they rushed out of the lab, the fairgrounds had erupted into chaos. Panicked attendees rushed in all directions, while embassy security struggled to maintain order. Russell quickly spotted a group of off-duty human security personnel and several Tellarite delegates with military backgrounds. "Listen up," he shouted, his voice cutting through the din. "We have a situation at the power grid. I need volunteers to form a joint security team. This is our chance to show what humans and Tellarites can accomplish together." As Russell organized the impromptu security force, Phoebe took charge of crowd control. Her diplomatic skills shone as she moved through the panicked masses, her calm demeanor and reassuring words helping to prevent a full-scale riot. "Stay calm, everyone," she called out, her tentacles gesturing soothingly. "Follow the embassy staff to the designated safe areas. We have the situation under control." As the joint human Tellarite security team made their way towards the power grid, Russell couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Despite their differences, they moved with surprising coordination, each species' strengths complementing the other's weaknesses. The sounds of struggle echoed from the power grid facility as they approached. Russell signaled for the team to fan out, using hand gestures that both humans and Tellarites understood. As they prepared to confront the Terran Purity Front saboteurs, Russell caught Phoebe's eye across the courtyard. In that moment, he realized that their actions here would not only determine the fate of the negotiations, but could reshape the future of human-Tellarite relations. With a deep breath, Russell gave the signal to move in. The joint security team surged forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead and protect the fragile peace they had begun to build. Forge, the joint security team moved swiftly through the power grid facility, their footsteps echoing off the metal walkways. Russell led the way, his military training evident in every precise movement. Phoebe kept pace beside him, her tentacles twitching with nervous energy. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with the Terran Purity Front operatives. The saboteurs, caught off guard by the mixed species team, fumbled with their equipment. Russell's mind raced, analyzing the situation. His eyes locked onto the communication devices the operatives were using. A memory flashed through his mind, a conversation with Dr. Zelix about Tellarite bioelectrical emissions. "Phoebe," he whispered urgently, "I need you to generate a specific frequency with your tentacles. It might disrupt their comms." Phoebe's eyes widened in understanding. Without hesitation, she began to modulate her tentacle movements, creating a subtle but distinct pattern. The air around them seemed to vibrate with an unseen energy. The effect was immediate. The operatives' communication devices crackled and hissed, filling the air with static. Confusion spread across their faces as they lost contact with each other. Russell seized the moment. "Now!" he shouted, signaling the team to move in. The joint human Tellarite force surged forward, their coordinated efforts catching the saboteurs off guard. In a flurry of movement, they subdued the operatives, securing them with restraints. As the last saboteur was apprehended, a low rumble shook the facility. Russell's heart sank as he realized the power grid had sustained damage during the confrontation. "The atmospheric generators?" Phoebe gasped, her tentacles writhing in alarm. If they Destabilize. We need to realign them, Russell finished, already moving towards the control room. They rushed to the main console, their fingers flying over the controls. Warning lights flashed across the screens, indicating critical system failures. We can't do it from here, Russell said, his voice tight with tension. We need to manually realign the generators. Phoebe's gaze fell on the entrance to the high radiation chamber where the generators were housed. That's a suicide mission, Russell. The radiation levels. We don't have a choice, he cut her off, meeting her eyes with dedication. Are you with me? Without hesitation, Phoebe nodded. They moved as one towards the chamber door, their bodies in perfect sync. As they entered the chamber, the air crackled with energy. The radiation meters on the wall spiked into the red zone. Russell and Phoebe worked furiously, their hands moving in tandem as they adjusted the generator alignments. Something strange began to happen. Instead of feeling weak or nauseous from the radiation, Russell felt a surge of energy coursing through his body. He glanced at Phoebe and saw her skin beginning to emit a faint glow. Their eyes met, and suddenly, words became unnecessary. Russell could feel Phoebe's thoughts, her emotions flowing into him, as if they were his own. They moved with even greater coordination, anticipating each other's actions before they happened. Outside the chamber, Dr. Exelix watched in awe as her instruments recorded unprecedented levels of bioelectrical synchronization between the human and Tellarite. Incredible, she murmured, her scales rippling with excitement. As the last generator clicked into place, the facility's alarms fell silent. Russell and Phoebe emerged from the chamber, their skin still faintly luminescent. They were immediately swarmed by cheering humans and Tellarites alike. Dr. Zelix pushed through the crowd, her scientific curiosity overriding protocol. Your physiological readings are off the charts, she exclaimed, running a scanner over their glowing forms. Your DNA, it's changing, adapting. This could revolutionize our understanding of interspecies compatibility. Before Russell or Phoebe could respond, they were interrupted by a commotion near the facility entrance. Grok, the hardline Tellarite leader, pushed his way through the crowd. His face, usually set in a scowl, now bore an expression of wonder. I was wrong, Grok announced, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. What I've witnessed here today, it changes everything. I hereby renounce my opposition to human-Tellarite relations. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by a surge of excited chatter. Russell and Phoebe stood at the center of it all, their hands intertwined, still glowing faintly in the dimly lit facility. As the adrenaline of the moment began to fade, Russell felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. He turned to Phoebe, seeing his own fatigue mirrored in her eyes. Without a word, they made their way through the crowd towards the exit. Outside, the Proxima 4 night had fallen, the alien stars twinkling overhead. As they walked back towards their quarters, Russell and Phoebe were acutely aware of the eyes following them, the whispers trailing in their wake. They had saved the negotiations, possibly changed the course of human-Tellarite relations, and undergone a transformation they still didn't fully understand. As they reached the door to their quarters, Russell paused, his hand on the handle. Phoebe, he said softly, whatever happens next, whatever this change means for us, I'm glad you're here with me. Phoebe's tentacles curled gently around his arm, a gesture that now felt as natural as breathing. As am I, Russell, she replied, her voice filled with warmth. As am I. They stepped inside, the door closing behind them. Outside, Proxima 4 continued to buzz with the events of the day, unaware that the true impact of Russell and Phoebe's actions was only beginning to unfold. As they stepped into their quarters. Both of them were physically and emotionally drained, yet there was an undeniable energy coursing between them, a connection that seemed to transcend their physical forms. Their moment of respite was short-lived. A sharp knock on the door jolted them from their contemplation. Dr. Zelix stood outside, her scales shimmering with awe-inspiring excitement. I apologize for the intrusion, she said, her voice trembling slightly. But we need you both in the medical bay immediately. The readings we've collected are unprecedented. Russell and Phoebe exchanged a glance, both sensing the other's mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Without a word, they followed Dr. Zelix through the bustling corridors of the embassy. The medical bay had been transformed in the short time since their heroic act at the power grid. Advanced Proxima technology lined the walls, screens flickered with streams of data, and a team of scientists from various species huddled around consoles, gesturing animatedly. As they entered, all eyes turned to them. Russell felt a wave of self-consciousness wash over him, acutely aware of the faint glow still emanating from his skin. He could sense Phoebe's discomfort mirroring his own. Dr. Zelix guided them to a pair of examination tables. "Please, lie down," she instructed, her professional demeanor barely masking her enthusiasm. "We need to run a series of non-invasive scans to better understand the changes occurring in your physiology." As they reclined on the tables, Russell reached out instinctively, his hand finding Phoebe's tentacle. The moment they touched, a surge of comfort and reassurance flowed between them. It was more than just an emotional connection. Russell could actually sense Phoebe's physical state, her elevated heart rate, the slight tension in her muscles. "Fascinating," Dr. Zelix murmured, her eyes fixed on the readings. "Your cellular structures are aligning, creating a hybrid physiology that combines elements of both human and Tellarite biology. It's as if your bodies are evolving to become more compatible with each other." The examination continued for hours, with various tests and scans conducted by the multi-species team of scientists. Russell and Phoebe remained connected throughout, drawing strength and comfort from each other's presence. As the test concluded, Admiral Helena Blackwood entered the medical bay, her face a mask of carefully controlled neutrality. "Dr. Zelix, I need a full report on your findings. Russell, Phoebe, I'm afraid I have some news that will significantly impact your immediate future." The Admiral's words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Russell sat up, his hand still intertwined with Phoebe's tentacle. "What's going on, Admiral?" Blackwood took a deep breath. "In light of these unprecedented developments, I've been in contact with United Earth Command and the Tellarite High Council. After much deliberation, they've granted you both special status as test subjects for an official interspecies compatibility study." Phoebe's tentacles writhed with a mixture of surprise and concern. "What exactly does that mean for us?" "It means," Blackwood continued, "that you'll be staying here on Proxima 4 for the foreseeable future. A specialized living quarters is being constructed as we speak, designed to accommodate your unique needs while allowing for continuous monitoring." Russell felt a surge of conflicting emotions, curiosity about the changes they were undergoing, apprehension about the loss of privacy, and an underlying excitement at the prospect of remaining close to Phoebe. He could sense similar feelings emanating from her through their touch. "The interspecies understanding fair will be extended indefinitely," Blackwood added. "It's evolving into a permanent exhibition showcasing this ongoing research and promoting cultural exchange. Like it or not, you two have become the centerpiece of a galactic scientific endeavor." As if on cue, a commotion erupted outside the medical bay. Through the windows, Russell could see a group of humans and Tellarites gathered, holding signs and shouting slogans. Their faces were contorted with anger and fear. "Not everyone is pleased with these developments," Blackwood said grimly. "A coalition of human and Tellarite conservatives has formed to protest what they see as a threat to the purity of their respective species. They've established a permanent picket line outside the embassy." Russell's mind reeled from the implications of it all. In the span of a few days, he and Phoebe had gone from diplomatic pawns to scientific marvels to the center of a galactic controversy. He turned to Phoebe, seeking reassurance in her alien yet increasingly familiar features. As their eyes met, a shared vision flashed between them, a glimpse of a future both thrilling and terrifying. They saw themselves continuing to change, their bodies and minds merging in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. They saw the wonder and fear their transformation would inspire across the galaxy. And through it all, they saw themselves together, facing whatever came next as one. The vision faded as quickly as it had come, leaving them both breathless. Russell squeezed Phoebe's tentacle gently, conveying without words his commitment to their shared journey. Dr. Zelix approached, her scales rippling with barely held-back excitement. "We're ready to move you to your new quarters," she said. "There's so much more we need to learn about your condition." As Russell and Phoebe stood to follow her, they knew they were stepping into uncharted territory. Their personal relationship had become a matter of galactic significance, their bodies and minds the subject of intense scientific scrutiny. Yet as they walked hand in tentacle, they felt a sense of purpose and unity that transcended species boundaries. The doors of the medical bay slid open, revealing a corridor lined with curious onlookers and flashing cameras. Russell and Phoebe paused for a moment, bracing themselves for the public scrutiny that now defined their lives. Then, with a shared nod of perseverance, they stepped forward into their new reality, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. As Russell and Phoebe stepped into the corridor, the flashing cameras and curious stares faded into the background. Their focus narrowed to the subtle changes coursing through their bodies, a shared awareness that something profound was happening beneath their skin. Days passed in a whirlwind of tests and observations. Dr. Zelix and her team worked tirelessly, monitoring every fluctuation in their physiology. Russell and Phoebe's skin continued to glow, but now it shimmered with an iridescent quality that seemed to blend human and Tellarite characteristics. One morning, as they prepared for another round of scans, Russell noticed Phoebe wincing as she moved away from him. "What's wrong?" he asked, concern etched on his face. Phoebe's tentacles curled inward. "I'm not sure. It's like there's a physical pull when we're apart. It hurts." Dr. Zelix, overhearing their conversation, rushed over with her scanner. Her eyes widened as she analyzed the readings. "Fascinating. Your bodies appear to be developing a symbiotic link. The pain you're experiencing might be a side effect of separation." The news sent shockwaves through the embassy. Admiral Blackwood, her face grave, called an emergency meeting with Russell, Phoebe, and the medical team. "We need to understand the full extent of these changes," Blackwood said, her voice tight with concern. "I've called for a summit of the top xenobiologists from Earth, Tellar Prime, Andoria, and Vulcan. We need to pool our knowledge if we're going to help you." As preparations for the summit began, Russell and Phoebe found themselves at the center of a growing storm. News of their transformation spread like wildfire across Proxima 4 and beyond. Crowds gathered outside the embassy, their reactions a mix of wonder and fear. One afternoon, as they looked out the window of their quarters, Russell spotted a group of protesters holding signs with slogans like, "Keep humanity pure," and "Tellarites for Tellarites." He felt a wave of unease wash over him. Phoebe sensed his discomfort through their link. "We knew this wouldn't be easy," she said, her tentacle gently squeezing his hand. The summit convened in a specially constructed quarantine facility within the embassy. Russell and Phoebe found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of activity as experts from across the galaxy examined them, debated theories, and ran countless tests. Dr. Zelix burst into the main conference room, her scales rippling with excitement. "I've made a breakthrough," she announced, her voice breathless. "Their DNA, it's intertwining in a way we've never seen before. It's creating a hybrid genetic structure that's entirely new." The assembled experts fell into a heated discussion, their voices rising as they debated the implications. Russell and Phoebe, still connected by touch, shared a look of apprehension. As the summit progressed, Russell and Phoebe's condition took a dramatic turn. Their skin now shimmered constantly, a mesmerizing blend of human and Tellarite textures. More alarmingly, they found it increasingly difficult to be apart. Even short separations caused intense physical discomfort. Dr. Zelix's team worked around the clock, trying to understand and mitigate the rapid changes. But with each passing day, it became clear that their transformation was outpacing the ability of current science to comprehend it. Outside the embassy, the situation was deteriorating. The Terran Purity Front, emboldened by the controversy, launched a propaganda campaign across human colonies. Their message of fear and isolationism began to gain traction, putting pressure on United Earth Command. On Tellar Prime, a counter-movement emerged. Young Tellarites, inspired by Phoebe's journey, staged peaceful demonstrations in support of closer ties with humanity. They called themselves the Phoebe Effect, challenging centuries of isolationist policies. As tensions rose, Admiral Blackwood called Russell, Phoebe, and the lead scientists into her office. Her face was drawn with fatigue and worry. "We've reached a critical point," she said. "The experts believe your condition is progressing too rapidly to be fully understood or controlled with our current knowledge." Dr. Zellick stepped forward, her voice somber. "We propose placing you both in stasis until we can develop more advanced research methods. It's the safest option for you and potentially for others." Russell felt a surge of panic, mirrored instantly by Phoebe through their link. The thought of being separated, frozen in time while the world moved on, was unbearable. As the Admiral continued explaining the plan, Russell's mind raced. He caught Phoebe's eye, and in that moment, they shared a single thought: escape. Later that night, as the embassy slept and the guards changed shifts, Russell and Phoebe made their move. Their enhanced physiology, a product of their transformation, allowed them to slip past security measures with surprising ease. They emerged into the alien night of Proxima Accords, the unfamiliar stars twinkling overhead. Without a word, guided by instinct and their deepening bond, they ran towards the wilderness beyond the city limits. Behind them, alarms began to blare. The hunt was on. On. The cool night air of Proxima 4 hit their faces as they sprinted away from the embassy, their hearts pounding in unison. For days, Russell and Phoebe moved through the alien landscape, their bodies adapting to the harsh environment with startling speed. As they traversed rocky plains and dense forests, Russell noticed their skin beginning to shift and change. "Phoebe, look," he whispered, holding out his arm. Before their eyes, his skin rippled and took on the mottled brown hue of the nearby tree bark. Phoebe's tentacles writhed in astonishment as her own skin mimicked the effect. "It's like we're becoming chameleons," she marveled. This new camouflage ability proved invaluable as search parties combed the wilderness. Russell and Phoebe could hear the hum of hovercrafts and the shouts of their pursuers, but remained undetected, their bodies blending seamlessly with the alien flora. Back at the embassy, Dr. Zara Zelix pored over data from long-range scanners, her scales rippling with excitement. "Admiral," she called out, "I've detected an unusual radiation signature. It's faint, but it's like nothing we've seen before." Admiral Helena Blackwood leaned over the console, her brow furrowed. "Is it them?" Dr. Zelix nodded. "I believe so. This radiation seems to be a byproduct of their ongoing transformation. We might be able to use it to track them." The Admiral's face hardened. "Do it. But be cautious. We don't know what prolonged exposure to this radiation might do to our search teams." As the hunt intensified, Russell and Phoebe found themselves drawn to the planet's polar regions. The icy landscape seemed to call to them, their new physiology craving the extreme conditions. They discovered a vast ice cave, its crystalline walls glowing with an otherworldly light. As they ventured deeper, Russell felt a strange resonance within his body, as if the very structure of the cave was in harmony with their changed DNA. "It feels like home," Phoebe murmured, her tentacles gently caressing the icy surfaces. Suddenly, exhaustion overwhelmed them both. They collapsed to the ground, their bodies intertwining as a translucent, cocoon-like structure began to form around them. Miles away, an Andorian glaciologist frowned at her instruments. "Captain, I'm picking up an unusual heat signature deep within the northern ice fields. It's like nothing I've ever seen." The news reached Admiral Blackwood within hours. She wasted no time assembling a joint human Tellarite expedition. "Find them," she ordered, "before it's too late." As the expedition approached the ice cave, strange phenomena began to manifest. The surrounding ice melted and reshaped itself, forming intricate DNA-like spiral patterns. Communication devices malfunctioned, emitting an eerie, harmonious hum that seemed to resonate with the cave structure. Dr. Zelix, monitoring from base camp, gasped as her instruments detected a massive surge of the unknown radiation. "Pull them out!" she shouted into her communicator. "The radiation levels are off the charts." Inside the cave, the expedition team stood in awe of the transformed environment. Tropical vines intertwined with Tellarite fungal growths, while Proximan crystals pulsed with an inner light. At the center of it all, Russell and Phoebe lay suspended in their cocoon, their features barely visible through the translucent shell. As the team began to retreat, the cocoon started to pulsate with energy. The cave walls resonated in response, creating a cascade of bioluminescent patterns that spread rapidly through the ice. "We need to leave now," the team leader shouted, torn between scientific curiosity and self-preservation. But it was too late. The energy emanating from Russell and Phoebe's cocoon intensified, bathing the cave in a blinding light. The expedition team shielded their eyes, bracing for whatever came next. Outside, Admiral Blackwood received the alarming reports. With a heavy heart, she issued a planet-wide alert, ordering the preparation of quarantine protocols and evacuation procedures for all non-essential personnel. As Proxima Accords held its breath, the mysterious ice cave continued to pulse with otherworldly energy. Whatever was emerging from that cocoon would change the course of human-Tellarite relations forever. The galaxy watched and waited, knowing that the next few hours would reshape the future of interspecies biology and diplomacy. In the depths of the cave, the cocoon began to crack open, releasing a blinding surge of energy that illuminated the entire cavern. The expedition team, caught off guard by the sudden intensity, stumbled backward. Dr. Zelix's voice crackled over their communicators, urgent and filled with static. "Get out now! Radiation levels are spiking!" The cave walls trembled, ice crystals showering down as the team scrambled for the exit. Behind them, the cocoon pulsed with increasing frequency, each wave sending tremors through the ground. The team leader, Captain Alessandra Chen, shouted over the din, "Move! Move!" She ushered her team through the narrowing passage, casting one last glance at the glowing cocoon before following. They burst out of the cave into the frigid Proximan air, gasping and disoriented. The ground beneath their feet continued to shake, more violently now. In the distance, they could see other expedition members rushing towards their shuttles. "This is Chen to base camp," the captain panted into her communicator. "We need immediate evac. The situation is critical." Admiral Blackwood's voice came through, tense but controlled. "Understood, Captain. All teams are being recalled. We're initiating planet-wide quarantine protocols." As shuttles streaked across the sky, picking up scattered expedition members, the tremors intensified. The ice fields began to crack and shift, revealing glimpses of something crystalline growing beneath the surface. Back at the embassy, Admiral Blackwood stood before a holographic display of Proxima 4, watching as red warning indicators spread across the planet's surface. She turned to her staff, her expression grim. "Begin full evacuation procedures for all non-essential personnel. Alert Earth and tell her Prime of the situation." Hours ticked by as ships departed Proxima 4's atmosphere, carrying terrified colonists and bewildered diplomats. Those who remained watched in awe and fear as massive crystal formations began to emerge from the ground, their structures eerily similar to those observed in the ice cave. Dr. Zelix, her scales reflecting the glow of her instruments, called out to Admiral Blackwood. "Helena, you need to see this." She gestured to a complex diagram on her screen. "These crystals, they're not just growing randomly. They're forming a network, and it's planet-wide." Blackwood leaned in, her brow furrowed. "What's guiding it?" "That's the thing," Zelix replied, her voice filled with wonder and trepidation. "The energy signature matches what we detected from Russell and Phoebe. Somehow, their hybrid DNA is influencing the entire ecosystem of Proxima 4. As if on cue, the nearest crystal formation began to shimmer. Its surface rippled, and suddenly a holographic image sprang to life above it. The assembled staff gasped as they recognized a scene from Earth, a bustling street in New Beijing, with Russell walking among the crowd. It's projecting their memories," Dr. Zelix whispered. More images appeared from other crystals. Phoebe in a Tellarite garden, Russell and Phoebe's first meeting at the embassy, scenes from their childhoods on their respective homeworlds. Each projection offered unprecedented insights into both human and Tellarite cultures. News of this phenomenon spread quickly across the galaxy. Xenoanthropologists clamored for access to Proxima 4, even as United Earth Command tightened the quarantine. On Earth, tensions reached a breaking point. The Terran Purity Front, seizing on the fear and uncertainty, launched a series of protests that quickly turned violent. Colonial governments struggled to maintain order as riots broke out in major cities. Meanwhile, on Tellar Prime, the Phoebe Effect movement gained momentum. Young Tellarites, inspired by the holographic displays of human culture, took to the streets in massive numbers. They demanded closer ties with Earth, challenging centuries of isolationist policies. 17 days after the initial energy surge, as the galaxy watched and waited, sensors detected movement within the ice cave. Admiral Blackwood, her face lined with exhaustion and commitment, donned an environmental suit. "Admiral, please reconsider," her security chief pleaded. "We don't know what's in there." Blackwood shook her head. "After everything that's happened, I need to see this for myself." She led a small team back to the cave entrance, their path illuminated by the eerie glow of the surrounding crystals. As they approached, they encountered a shimmering force field of unknown composition. Suddenly, the force field dissipated. From within the cave emerged two figures that, at first glance, seemed neither human nor Tellarite. Russell and Phoebe floated slightly above the ground, their bodies a perfect blend of both species. Their skins shimmered with iridescent colors that shifted in response to their surroundings. Admiral Blackwood took a cautious step forward. "Russell? Phoebe?" The transformed couple turned to face her, their eyes glowing with an inner light. When they spoke, their voices resonated in perfect unison, filled with an otherworldly harmony. "Admiral Blackwood," they said, their tone both familiar and utterly alien. "We have much to share." "Admiral Blackwood," they said, their tone both familiar and utterly alien. "We have much to share." As Russell and Phoebe, now a single shimmering entity, began to speak, their words carried an otherworldly resonance that seemed to vibrate through the very air. Admiral Blackwood leaned forward, straining to comprehend the profound knowledge they were about to impart. Suddenly, a blinding flash erupted from the transformed couple. A massive electromagnetic pulse radiated outward, washing over the assembled team and spreading rapidly across the planet's surface. The expedition members stumbled, their equipment crackling and dying in their hands. Blackwood's communicator went dead, cutting off her connection to the outside world. In the ensuing silence, panic spread like wildfire. The remaining colonists on Proxima 4 found themselves plunged into darkness as power grids failed and communication networks collapsed. The bustling command center at the embassy descended into chaos, with staff members shouting and scrambling to restore functionality to their dead consoles. Amidst the confusion, a group of figures moved with purposeful stealth. They had been waiting for this moment, hidden among the evacuation teams. Members of the Terran Purity Front, they saw the planet-wide blackout as their chance to strike. Led by a scarred man known only as Cypher, the extremists converged on the ice cave. They carried strange, pulsing weapons, the fruits of clandestine research into hybrid DNA destabilization. As they approached, Cypher's eyes gleamed with fanatical purpose. "For the purity of humanity," he whispered, raising his weapon. The air crackled as the extremists opened fire. Streams of coruscating energy lashed out, enveloping Russell and Phoebe. Their shimmering aura flickered and dimmed, the iridescent colors of their skin fading to a sickly pallor. Admiral Blackwood, caught off guard by the sudden attack, reached for her sidearm, only to find it non-functional. She turned to her security team, gesturing frantically. "Stop them! Protect Russell and Phoebe!" But as the security personnel rushed forward, something unexpected happened. The hybrid couple's bodies began to absorb the energy from the weapons, their form rippling and shifting. The attackers watched in horror as their assault not only failed to reverse the transformation, but seemed to be accelerating it. Russell and Phoebe's bodies began to meld together, their features blurring and merging. Within moments, where two beings had stood, there was now only one. An androgynous figure that embodied both human and Tellarite characteristics in perfect harmony. The new entity opened its eyes, which glowed with an inner light that outshone even the crystals surrounding them. When it spoke, its voice reverberated with power. "We are Ruseb." Rusebe raised a hand, and the crystal formations across Proxima 4 pulsed in response. The planet-wide network came alive, each crystal becoming a conduit for Rusebe's consciousness. In an instant, every mind on the planet, human, Tellarite, and Proximan alike, was linked in a vast telepathic web. The Terran Purity Front attackers dropped their weapons, clutching their heads as their minds were flooded with alien memories and emotions. Cypher fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he experienced the life of a young Tellarite child, feeling her hopes, dreams, and fears as if they were his own. Admiral Blackwood gasped as her mind expanded, touching the consciousness of every being on the planet. She saw through 1,000 eyes, felt with 1,000,000 nerve endings. The barriers between species dissolved, replaced by a profound understanding that transcended language and culture. In major cities across Earth and Tellar Prime, millions of citizens woke from vivid dreams, their minds filled with experiences from worlds they had never visited. Humans found themselves longing for the taste of Tellarite delicacies they had never eaten, while Tellarites hummed human lullabies they had never heard. Dr. Zara Zelix, partially shielded from the full force of the telepathic broadcast due to her unique Proximan physiology, recognized the potential dangers of such a sudden and massive shift in consciousness. She fought against the tide of alien thoughts, focusing her mind on the task at hand. "We need to modulate this broadcast," she muttered, her scales rippling with concentration as she worked to repurpose a nearby crystal formation into a makeshift control device. Too much, too fast. It could lead to widespread trauma. As Zelix worked feverishly, Rusabe's influence continued to grow. The hybrid entity reached out beyond Proxima IV, its consciousness brushing against the minds of distant races. Andorian and Vulcan observers, initially present as neutral parties, found themselves drawn into the unfolding drama. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. Deep within Proxima IV's core, ancient machinery stirred to life, the remnants of a long-forgotten precursor race. Massive structures erupted from beneath the surface, reconfiguring the landscape in a display of technological might that dwarfed even the crystal network. Admiral Blackwood, her mind blown from the telepathic connection and the rapidly evolving situation, knew she faced a critical decision. The transformation of Russell and Phoebe into Rusibi, the activation of the ancient Proximan technology, and the spreading hybrid influence presented both unprecedented opportunities and grave threats. As she struggled to process the flood of information and emotions, Blackwood's training kicked in. She took a deep breath, centering herself amidst the chaos. The fate of multiple species hung in the balance, and she knew her next actions would shape the course of galactic history. With newfound clarity, Admiral Blackwood activated her emergency beacon, a device designed to function even in the aftermath of an EMP. As the signal pulsed outward, calling for the formation of an interstellar council, she turned to face Rusabe. The hybrid entity regarded her with eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies. Blackwood stood tall, her voice steady as she addressed the being that had once been Russell and Phoebe. "We stand at a crossroads," she said, her words carrying the weight of worlds. "The path we choose now will determine the future of not just our species, but of all sentient life in the galaxy." As if in response, the crystal formations began to resonate at an increasing frequency. The vibrations triggered seismic activity across Proxima IV, opening fissures in the planet's surface. From these chasms emerged glimpses of a vast underground network of alien technology, a testament to the planet's role as an ancient hub of interstellar activity. Rusabe's form shimmered, its power growing with each passing moment. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reshape the very fabric of the known universe. As representatives from Earth, Tellar Prime, and other affected worlds prepared to convene, the future hung in delicate balance, awaiting the decisions that would chart the course of galactic civilization. Civilization. As the tremors subsided, Admiral Blackwood's emergency beacon pulsed steadily, its signal racing across the vast distances of space. Within hours, ships from Earth, Tellar Prime, and other affected worlds began arriving in the Proxima system, their hulls gleaming against the backdrop of stars. A neutral space station orbiting Proxima IV became the impromptu gathering place for the hastily assembled Interstellar Council. Representatives from various species filed into the station's main chamber, their faces etched with a mixture of awe and trepidation. On the planet's surface, Rusabe's form continued to shimmer and shift, its consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of physical form. Dr. Zara Zelix worked tirelessly, her scaled hands flying over makeshift control panels as she attempted to modulate the hybrid entity's influence. Suddenly, the air in the council chamber crackled with energy. Gasps echoed through the room as a dazzling display of light coalesced into a holographic figure. Rusabe's projection stood before them, its form constantly morphing between human and Tellarite features. When it spoke, the hybrid entity's voice resonated with a harmony that touched the minds of all present. "Esteemed representatives," Rusabe began, "we stand at the threshold of a new era." The gathered dignitaries leaned forward, captivated by the otherworldly presence. Rusabe's holographic eyes swept across the room, seeming to peer into the very souls of those assembled. "The technology awakening on Proxima 4 is not merely a relic of the past," Rusabe continued. "It is a key to our shared future, a galactic network designed to bridge the gaps between species, to foster understanding where once there was only fear and mistrust." As Rusabe spoke, the station's view screens came to life, displaying images of the ancient structures erupting from Proxima 4's surface. The assembled representatives watched in awe as the planet's landscape transformed, revealing glimpses of a vast, interconnected system that spanned the globe. "We have unlocked the ability to activate this network," Rusabe explained, its form shimmering with awe-inspiring power. "With it, we can usher in an age of unprecedented cooperation and advancement." The hybrid entity raised its hands, and the holographic display expanded, filling the chamber with a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Points of light began to appear, connecting worlds that had long been isolated from one another. But as the connections grew, so did the complications. The station shuddered, alarms blaring as sensors detected gravitational anomalies throughout the Proxima system. Outside the viewport, space itself seemed to ripple and distort. Admiral Blackwood stepped forward, her voice cutting through the rising panic. "The expansion is too rapid," she declared. "We need to stabilize the influence before it tears the system apart." The Admiral's eyes blazed with commitment as she addressed the Council. "I propose we combine our scientific knowledge, our technology, to create a stabilizing field around Rusabe and the Crystal Network. We can control the expansion, prevent catastrophic damage, and harness this power for the benefit of all." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Representatives from various worlds huddled together, sharing data and theories. Screens flickered with complex equations and diagrams as the greatest scientific minds in the galaxy pooled their resources. Amidst the frenzy of activity, Dr. Zara Zelix's voice cut through the din. "I've found it!" she exclaimed, her scales shimmering with excitement. "The key to stabilization lies in Proximan biology itself." All eyes turned to the Proximan scientist as she explained her breakthrough. "There's a compound in native Proximan plant life that acts as a natural buffer against the hybrid energy. If we can synthesize it on a large scale, we can create a containment field that will allow safe interaction with Rusabe's influence." Time seemed to accelerate as the plan took shape. Ships from Earth, Tellar Prime, and allied worlds moved into position around Proxima 4, forming a massive array. Specialized equipment was hastily assembled, drawing on the combined technological might of multiple civilizations. On the planet's surface, teams worked feverishly to harvest and process the crucial Proximan plant compound. Dr. Zelix oversaw the operation, her expertise guiding the synthesis process. As spatial rifts began to form in the space surrounding Proxima 4, the interstellar fleet initiated the containment field. Energy beams lanced between the ships, powered by the synthesized Proximan compound. A shimmering bubble of force enveloped the planet, its surface rippling with iridescent patterns. Within the field, Rusabe's form began to stabilize. The hybrid entity's power, once wild and uncontrolled, now flowed in harmony with the ancient network. The ground-shaking tremors subsided, replaced by a gentle hum of energy that pulsed in sync with the planet's core. Admiral Blackwood watched from the station's command center as the crisis abated. The gravitational anomalies dissipated, and the fabric of space settled back into its natural state. She allowed herself a small smile of relief before turning to address the Council once more. "We've taken the first step," she said, her voice carrying the weight of the moment. "But our work is just getting started. We must learn to harness this new power responsibly, to use it for the betterment of all our peoples." As if in response to her words, A wave of energy emanated from Rusebe, washing over the gathered representatives. Minds expanded, touching consciousness across vast distances. Ancient barriers of mistrust and fear began to crumble, replaced by a profound sense of understanding and empathy. In that moment, the seeds of a new galactic order were sown. The Proxima Accords, a framework for peaceful interaction and shared advancement, began to take shape. Earth and Teller Prime, once bitter rivals, now stood together at the forefront of a new age of interspecies cooperation. Rusebe, no longer a singular entity but a collective consciousness shared between Russell and Phoebe, assumed its role as guardian and interpreter of the ancient network. The hybrid being's voice echoed through the minds of those present, a promise and a challenge intertwined. "The path ahead is uncharted," Rusebe intoned, "but together we will forge a future brighter than any single world could achieve alone." As the council session drew to a close, Admiral Blackwood found herself standing before a viewport, gazing down at the transformed surface of Proxima 4. The planet glowed with an inner light, a beacon of hope in the vast expanse of space. She knew that the true test lay ahead, in the implementation of the Proxima Accords, in the delicate balance of power and knowledge that now connected worlds across the galaxy. But as she watched ships from a dozen different species working in harmony around the planet, Blackwood felt a surge of optimism. The universe had changed, and with it, the very nature of what it meant to be a sentient being in a vast and wondrous cosmos. The Admiral squared her shoulders, ready to face the challenges and opportunities that awaited in this new era of galactic cooperation.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.